It's rather cliche to say that the quarterbacks are the key to a win for BYU or Georgia Tech in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, but this game, I think it absolutely is imperative that these quarterbacks shine.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk all things BYU and Georgia Tech, but with a unique slant. No, not that unique, but we're looking at the quarterbacks and why they should and could be the keys to a victory this weekend in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. Then we're going to talk some BYU basketball. A new addition to the BYU roster is expected to make his debut tonight in BYU's final non-conference game. That's Abdullah Ahmed. What to expect from him and the Cougars as they take on Eastern Washington. We'll get into that. And then we'll also talk about BYU football through a transfer portal lens of a new addition to the transfer portal. A guy that BYU chased a couple of years ago is now back on the free market, and he could absolutely fill a need for BYU in the defensive secondary. It's Sione Lalea, and what does he offer to BYU? We'll get into all of that. It's all ahead on today's show, and it's all brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Of course, with your NFL live bets all season long, the best place to stay up on the action with our friends over at FanDuel. Get started today at FanDuel.com or on the FanDuel app. All right, so BYU and Georgia Tech getting ready to square off this Saturday. And it feels like it's been a long time coming because it has been a long time coming. The bigger thing I want to discuss here is that these are two teams that are led in large part due to their running game prowess. And what I mean by that is both of these teams, they like to run to set up the pass. And that's not a bad thing. In this day and age of college football, as balanced as an offense can be is actually a major strength. And it's something that BYU in particular has talked about for many, many years with Aaron Roderick as their offensive coordinator. He wants to have a 50% run, 50% pass split, if at all possible. Now, it doesn't ever really work out where you're straight up 50%, but the whole idea is to have a defense thinking, okay, could it be run? Could it be pass? And they don't know which way it's going. You want to have that balance. And when you strike that balance, you're off to a good start. And that's why this game, speaking of BYU and Georgia Tech, could feature two quarterbacks that could absolutely be the difference between winning or losing. Because if you look at the stats, both of these quarterbacks have put up fairly remarkable numbers. Haynes King, as Georgia Tech's quarterback, is both their leading passer and leading rusher, whereas BYU has their leading rusher being LJ Martin. And I know that LJ was the offensive player of the year in the Big 12 conference, but consider what Haynes King is meant to Georgia Tech's offense as compared to what a guy like Bachmeier is meant to BYU's offense. And it's a very, very, I think, valid comparison that these two quarterbacks are going to play a key role. Bachmeier, 2,708 yards passing. He's a shade over 500 yards rushing, if I recall correctly. And the nice part is both of these guys have star power in them, and that is what could drive this game for whoever shines at the quarterback position, favoring their team winning this football game. Yeah, 527 yards, just double checking on that, has 11 rushing touchdowns. So you look at this as two very, very balanced offenses that are going to come out Saturday afternoon there in the Camping World Stadium, I think is what it's still called down there, the old Citrus Bowl, and they are going to absolutely try and establish a ground game. This could be a game, if both of these teams' offenses are able to run the ball effectively, could be over in 3 hours flat. That is how quickly this game could go if the run games are as potent as they could be. But it also doesn't take anything away from the quarterbacks in this contest, because I think both of them, as I mentioned, have major star power. And considering there are still question marks about a guy like LJ Martin and the health of his shoulder, well, could that mean that Bachmeier steps into a more prominent role for BYU in this circumstance where the rushing attack and the passing game kind of relies upon his shoulder? Because outside of him, you know who BYU's third leading rusher on the season is? Parker Kingston. You heard that right. Parker Kingston has 22 carries, 103 yards. Fourth on the depth chart, fourth on the list, I should say, of leading rushers is Cody Hagan with 93 yards. And then finally get to Sione Moa, who has seen his role really reduced just simply due to injury this year, 18 carries for 92 yards. So BYU without LJ Martin, should they have to play without him? Yeah, this could become, a quarterback duel for the ages. Does not also take away what Georgia Tech also has in their backfield, because Malachi Hosley and Jamal Haynes, I think it's Hosley, and Jamal Haynes have both combined for a shade over 1,100 yards, 634 yards for Hosley, and 504 yards for Jamal Haynes. So there is a major strategic advantage in the case of a program like Georgia Tech having a more balanced production with their backfield, having two running backs, versus BYU, where it's essentially LJ Martin and Bear Bachmeier in their backfield. I look at this. I am excited for the game. I also look at the fact that if BYU is going to win this game, it could really rely upon a guy like Bear Bachmeier, as it has at multiple points this season, outshining the opposing quarterback, in this case, Haynes King. And the experience factor goes on Haynes King's side of things, because he's a fifth-year senior, if I recall correctly, this point, maybe even a sixth-year senior. He's played a lot of college football, but anything that we have seen from Bear Bachmeier all season long indicates he's anything but your typical true freshman. And now that he's at the end of his freshman campaign, do we consider him really a true freshman anymore? No, it's simply a moniker in name only. He has played 13 games at this point. This will be his 14th game of his college career, and he should be very capable at minimum of really understanding and getting BYU into the best fits possible to help them have success on the football field. I look forward to this game. I wish I were going to Orlando, have some other things that's holding me here close to home. But those of you that are going, I think you're in for a treat, because these two teams, unlike a certain team in South Bend, Indiana, they actually want to be at this game. And I'm expecting it to be one of the best, if not the best, non-playoff/playoff bowl game of the entire season, much like last year's Alamo Bowl was. We'll see how BYU performs, and this could be, once again, another opportunity for Bear Bachmeier to just put another gold star next to his name on his way to absolute true superstardom in college football, if he can find a way to lead BYU to victory in this game. But it's not going to be easy, because the guy across from him, Haynes King, he's got the same type of talent and the same type of capability, and we'll see how it all plays out on Saturday afternoon. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going down with BYU basketball. They finish up their non-conference slate tonight. Yeah, it's crazy to think that the next time BYU takes the court after tonight, it'll be Big 12 plays. BYU will head to the Little Apple to take on the Kansas State Wildcats. What do they need to show tonight against Eastern Washington? Well, there's one thing in particular. Should be the debut of Abdullah Ahmed. What can he offer to BYU as they gear up for Big 12 play? I think a lot, and we'll get into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast. We all know this. One big play and suddenly everything feels different during said games. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it literally in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets on everything as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, and every highlight moment, not to mention you see some of the more mundane moments as well. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, running back starts to run wild on the defense, or when the momentum simply flips after a big turnover. Think about what happened with Baltimore last night on Sunday Night Football against New England. I think it was Zay Flowers who crippled my fantasy football team. That turnover absolutely flipped this game. So FanDuel helps you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You also can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. Keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, and every possibility. So you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, or tonight in the case of Monday Night Football with the 49ers and the Colts. Visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. It's all courtesy of FanDuel. As I like to say, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate you guys for being with us. Also, thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network America's #1 podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out our brand new Everydayer Club. The best part is it has access to ad-free audio feeds for every Locked On Cougars episode, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcast app. An invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which the thing I'm noticing more and more with Discord is kind of what Twitter and some of these social media platforms used to be before, algorithms and the like took them over. So if you want to get in on all of this, you can go to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com, or tap the link in the show notes below to learn more about our brand new everydayer club. All right, so BYU basketball is in action tonight as they take on Eastern Washington. And much like the last three opponents for BYU, Eastern Washington is expected to come in and get beat pretty thoroughly. Now, I said that last time when BYU played Abilene Christian, and much like BYU's done all season long, it feels like there's a filling out process with this BYU team. They start slow, whether it's the first 5 to 10 minutes of these games. They have to kind of feel out this opponent. And then from that point on, they really make a push to put these teams away. But ACU, speaking of Abilene Christian, they made BYU work for it. They got as close as 2 points in that second half before BYU said, okay, enough's enough, and they pulled away for good in that game. But those are the type of games that when you have a team that's coming here to collect a check, that's obviously what they're here for. But they also want to go out there and become the epitome of brutality type team that John Rothstein loves to tweet about. You beat a team that you've collected a game check for. Well, guess what? That is the epitome of brutality. And that's what BYU has been seeking to avoid. And I don't expect that's going to be the case tonight. But Eastern Washington, they should take faith that they can go out and get a good start on this game against BYU, even though they're coming off a pretty decided loss to the University of Utah on Saturday night. The biggest thing to pay attention to tonight for BYU is if they, can avoid another slow start like they've had seemingly all non-conference schedule long, because it feels like no matter who the opponent has been, BYU has come out of the gate slow and then has turned it on as the first half kind of comes down to the final stanza of that. And then in the second half, we hear all the time, they're a second half team. Why can't they just be a team that from literally the get-go, they just pound people? That would be fun to see. So first, can we avoid a slow start if you're BYU? It's one thing I'm looking for in tonight's game. Second thing, well, will Keba Keita be saw Alexei Kostic miss a game due to illness. Then Keba missed this past game. Well, expecting that Keba will be back, that should reinsert BYU's regular rotations into their lineup. But I was impressed with what Hadim Boop as well as Mihailo Boskovic offered against Abilene Christian. Neither one of them are true fives. They're more stretch fours in the best case scenario, maybe even a 3 on the perimeter, despite their height and length. But they filled in admirably with 6 blocks between the two of them against Abilene Christian and showed that they could provide some interior presence that BYU lacked without them. Well, Kevin Young was asked post-game. He said that he actually made the comment and then was asked that he was considering starting Xavier Staten, but then decided, you know what, we're not going to do that. And Staten only saw, I think, like 46 seconds of action in the final dying moments of that game against ACU. So he said that there's no room to really play 3 centers at this point in his lineup. So insert the name Abdullah Ahmed. So how do you work that out? Well, as I mentioned, I think Hadim Boop, especially Mihailo Boskovic, those two are better suited off their bench roles to come in and be a stretch 4 or a longer 3 in this offense and defense that BYU has in their lineups right now. Whereas Abdullah Ahmed, he's a bruiser. He is 6'10", 240 plus pounds, and he's got not Division I basketball experience. He's got G League experience, professional basketball experience. And yeah, it's caused some fans out there to take umbrage with it, but it's no different than guys like Mihailo Boskovic and Alexei Kostic who have come over from the Euro League to play for BYU. They've got experience in the professional ranks themselves. So how does a G League guy not count versus a Euro League guy? When you can come up with an adequate argument that neither one of those count, great. Either they're all okay or they're not okay. And that's, I think, the long and short of that conversation. But the bigger point to be had here is Abdullah Ahmed could be the backup 5 BYU has been lacking all season long. Keba Keita, when he's in the lineup for BYU, he is absolutely a linchpin of everything BYU does, especially defensively. What Abdullah Ahmed, and he's going to see his first action time, is what he told Hayes Fawcett of On3.com. He can come in and provide maybe 10 to 15 minutes off the bench and be that backbone of the second unit defense. If he is truly as locked in as hopefully he is, he should be able to come in and provide adequate minutes that will allow the adjustment on the rotations for Kevin Young to, once again, put Hadim Boop as well as Mihailo Boskovic maybe into that stretch 4 role where they can come in. They're not having to rely upon being in the interior all the time. They can extend out to the perimeter and really provide a lot of spacing and size for BYU they've been lacking, it feels like, at points this season. I'm looking forward to seeing what Abdullah Ahmed looks like because he hasn't been with the team very long. And according to what Hayes Fawcett says, he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. So he's just kind of starting out his run with the BYU Cougars, and this will burn 1 year of eligibility playing for BYU at midseason. But I think that the whole mindset is to get him into the lineup and see what he's capable of, and then go from there. Once again, this is one game of tune-up really from Abdullah Ahmed, and I know that they play Kansas State out of the chute when it comes to Big 12 play, and it doesn't feel like any game outside of Utah in Big 12 play is going to be a gimme, because Utah right now, their net rating is, I think, sub 125. I think is what I saw, KenPom ratings and the like. So not great. And they're really the only team that is sub 100, if I recall correctly, that I saw from the Big 12. So outside of Utah, BYU's got a gauntlet coming up with the Big 12 play. It's absolutely insane to think of what the Big 12 could feature this year. We just had the likes of Texas Tech upsetting Duke, and we've seen a number of those other top-tier games that have been played by Big 12 teams. So anything that Abdullah Ahmed can provide, quite literally at this point, I think is an added bonus, because BYU has been trying to find an adequate, I guess, I don't know, want to say a stopgap or whatever you want to call it, for their backup 5 position, and insert a guy from the Westchester Knicks of the G League as that answer. And I'm hopeful that he proves to be the guy that BYU hopes they got when they signed him via obviously his recruitment process. I'm looking forward to it. It's a big opportunity tonight to see what he's capable of, even as limited as his minutes might be, pending Keba Keita being back in the lineup. But so long as all goes well, I think BYU got a major pickup with regards to Abdullah Ahmed joining the roster, and it should bear fruit maybe as soon as tonight when BYU takes on the Eastern Washington Eagles in their final non-conference tune-up. One other thing to pay attention to tonight is to see, okay, does the rotation tighten up at all, and who maybe loses minutes to Abdullah Ahmed? Well, that's one thing to pay attention to, just kind of the adjustment of the rotations, or does the rotation expand versus contract? That's just one other note to pay attention to on that front. All right, we'll finish up today's show coming up next. As we've been doing the last little bit, we've been talking about some of these transfer portal names that have popped up that have BYU connections. Well, another one popped up, and his team's still playing in the playoff. Yeah, Sione Laulea has announced he's going into the transfer portal and will no longer be a part of the Oregon Ducks roster the rest of their playoff run. What could that mean for him? Could that mean for BYU, a program that once upon a time wanted him to play in Provo, Utah? We'll get into who he is and why he would be a really, really nice fit for BYU next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, the World Cup is coming back, obviously, but there's also nothing like a college football season as well. So World Cup next summer, college football season kind of coming to an end here. Tailgates, packed stadium, being right in there in the middle of it all, the energy, the bands, the moments you all will remember forever. But actually getting your tickets, that part could be the most frustrating part. Logins, prices jumping at checkout, and a whole litany of other issues. That's why Game Time gives the advantage back to you as the fans. It is the easiest way to unlock your amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You open the Game Time app to look at upcoming games. You can choose BYU in the case of what's going on with the Pop-Tarts Bowl this weekend. You can see you'll be absolutely floored at how quickly it is to find the tickets you want to find in terms of great seats. It is incredibly easy to use. Speaking of the app, going from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. And the best part is they have zone deals. They stood out. You can pick a section, they pick the seats, and you save money because you don't have to necessarily stipulate which seats you're sitting in. You just pick the section. Seeing college football tickets starting as low as $25 makes it easy to plan a game day trip. And the best part is knowing all these prices from our friends at Game Time include all fees right up front, makes the whole process stress-free. So take a guess we're buying your tickets and do it with our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Against the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get started once again with your tickets with our friends over at Game Time. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Do want to give a shout out to all of you out there who said hi to me at the BYU basketball game the other night. Ran into actually a bunch of family. I was at a family party over the weekend who said that they have a lot of other family members that are watching and consuming this podcast. It kind of indicated to me that the reach of this podcast is far beyond what I ever really envisioned it being, because I sit in this Harry Potter closet, as I like to say, doing my show and talking into a camera. But truthfully, this time of year, I'm grateful to all of you for your support of the podcast. Please continue to subscribe, rate, review, share with your family and friends. If you're watching on YouTube, click that like button, click the bell notification to make sure that you know when a new show drops as soon as it goes live. And as always, Thank you for all of your support right here on Locked On Cougars and, of course, with the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, so another name to know for BYU when it comes to the transfer portal right now is Sione Laulea. Now, a lot of these names we've been talking about, if you're an everydayer, are names of guys who have connections to BYU, whether it's family connections, previous recruiting ties, members of the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints, a whole litany of different things that tie them to BYU. Well, in the case of today with Sione Laulea, there are two of those that apply here. A, he was recruited by BYU back in 2023 when he was the number one junior college cornerback coming out of California. And number two, he is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, he decided ultimately to sign with the Oregon Ducks, and during that era, remember 2023 with BYU was, struggling a little bit. In the last two seasons, I've really picked up for BYU in terms of their on-field prowess. Much like the Oregon Ducks have been rolling, well, BYU's been rolling right alongside them, but Sione has not been playing a lot as a member of the Oregon Ducks roster. He played just 4 games a season ago, his first year out of junior college, and ended up redshirting for Oregon. And then the hope was maybe he'd take on a bigger role this year, but he's played in a grand total of 6 games, thereby burning a year of eligibility as a junior college guy. That means he's got 1 year left, and he's been fairly pedestrian in terms of his overall numbers. He's got 7 total tackles on the season, 2 pass breakups, and he's been relegated to a reserve role for the Oregon Ducks. So he announced over the weekend, or was announced via reports, that he is going to hit the transfer portal, and he is no longer going to be a part of the Oregon roster. Now, I need to remind everybody, as I do with these, looking at these players, Sione and other players are not officially going to enter the portal till January 2nd. So we're coming up on it, but we're still a little ways out, 2 weeks or so away from that portal window actually opening. And these guys, in theory, being able to talk and decide where they're going to go. But there's obviously back channel communication that can happen. And I think the fact that BYU has, I think, somewhat of a need at cornerback. You lose a guy like Maury Bamba this year. You have guys like Evan Johnson and Trey Alexander who have been very, very awesome. They've been awesome. They've been fantastic players for BYU this season, figuring to come back and reprise their roles next season. You can never do that badly with a 6'4", almost 200-pound cornerback, I think, to have on your roster. And that's what Sione Laulea is. He's listed at 6'4", 196 pounds. And I think that his skill set was once upon a time a thing that BYU absolutely coveted, because you can't teach that height and length as a cornerback. But he obviously is looking for more game time, and I think that's what BYU, in theory, could provide him. Now, is he going to want a guaranteed starting position? Maybe that's what he's looking for. And if that's the case, BYU probably wouldn't be able to offer that to him because, as I mentioned, I think Evan Johnson, he's become BYU's premier lockdown corner. And I think Trey Alexander, he's well on his way to becoming just that himself as just a sophomore going into his junior season next year. So if a guy like Sione, if he were to be contacted by Gennaro Guilford or Jay Hill or anybody on BYU's defensive staff, and he says, hey, I want you to guarantee me I'll start at BYU, you just simply can't do that. You tell them, hey, you have every opportunity to come in and earn that playing time and to be a part of the rotation here. I think they can point to the success that they had this year, kind of with a 3-man rotation. You had Maury Bamba, you had Evan Johnson, and you had Trey Alexander. I think between the 3 of them, BYU put a very, very solid product in terms of their cornerback ability on display. That, in theory, should be an advantage to recruiting a guy like Sione and say, hey, understand you'll probably be a rotation guy. You'll probably come in and have to earn your time, but also understand if you are as good as we believe you can be and still could be in a Cougar uniform, get over here, prove it, and we're going to make sure we do the absolute best by you we possibly can do. And if he comes in and he's better than Trey Alexander, Evan Johnson, heck, you can never do worse than having a guy come in and start. You want to have the best players you possibly can have. And maybe Sione's just been overshadowed by other players on Oregon's roster and could come in and provide and be that guy that BYU needs at cornerback. I'm not saying he's going to be a day one starter. I'd be hard pressed to say that for really anybody in the transfer portal, because more often than not, guys who hit the transfer portal, there's really one thing they're looking for. It's more playing time. The secondary thing, more money. That's kind of the 2 things that rule when it comes to the transfer portal. But I think that the ties that he has as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, A, and B, the fact that guys like Gennaro Guilford and Jay Hill recruited him out of junior college, and he probably still has strong ties to them, that could provide BYU the in they need to get a guy like Sione Laulea into this program. And once again, I think that BYU understands that having top-notch quality depth, that's kind of the one thing that still in some ways is holding BYU back in terms of their pursuit of a Big 12 title, making the college football playoff and the like. And getting guys like this into your program, whether they come in and end up being starting caliber players or they come in and just end up being rotation pieces, well, you know what? That depth, it absolutely has to be there. And I think that Jay Hill has made a concerted effort over his past 3 seasons of BYU's defensive coordinator to build that quality depth. And that's why I think Sione Laulea offers in spades at minimum. But the hope is, I think, from his end, that he comes to a place he'd be familiar with around guys who are like-minded, a lot of the members of the Church of Jesus Christ, and would obviously come in and provide instant rotation, but also pushing guys like Evan Johnson and Trey Alexander to be the best they possibly can be. I think this would be a really, really nice addition for BYU should it play out. Now, I say that saying that, once again, the transfer portal is not officially open, but agents, parents, coaches, speaking of high school coaches and the like, there's communication that happens. And anybody who wants to say that there's tampering out there, I don't want to hear anything about tampering anymore. It's in this day and age of college football, there's no such thing. There's so much communication happening behind the scenes. And I'm saying this from the BYU lens, but I'm talking across college football. You can guarantee that there are guys on BYU's roster, I would say downright starting caliber players, who have probably had overtures made to them throughout this season, but BYU's not special. There have been guys from every roster seemingly having that chirped at them. And some guys are going to go out there and pursue what they can. I think guys like you saw Josh Hoover and some of these quarterbacks, Rocco Becht, et cetera, from the Big 12, they're hitting the portal. Well, I think number one, they're trying to cash in on money. And number two, find the best possible position they can find themselves in when it comes to their play on the field. So understand that if anybody wants to cry wolf or whine about tampering in this day and age of college football, everybody's fed up with it, but also at the same time, everybody understands that it's happening literally everywhere. Now, that sounds, I think, trite to say that, but it's also the reality of the situation that's going on here. So I do think the guy like Sione Laulea be a fantastic addition for BYU, and we'll see how the portal window plays out when it finally opens. But there are names, a lot of names, it feels like, because you talked about the likes of Joshua Dye. We've talked about Leona Lefau. We've talked about Walker Lyons. And in this case, Sione Laulea. All of them have ties and connections to BYU that would give them, I think, an opportunity to come in and be impact, if not starting caliber players for BYU. But I think that the nice part is the portal is looking like it could be a place that BYU can step into and find some difference makers, if not outright depth pieces that provide the quality depth you want them to have. We'll see how it all plays out, but a very interesting conversation. And we'll continue to have these as these names continue to pop up, because I find them absolutely intriguing. Because anymore, when it comes to the high school recruiting process, the relationships you forge with these players, you may not get that guy right out of high school, but 1, 2, 3 years down the line, when they don't pan out wherever they're at, or they feel like they want to have a new opportunity at another school, well, guess what? Those relationships you build, so long as you don't burn the bridge, very well could still pay major dividends down the line. And I think BYU stands poised to take advantage of that in this portal window. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, thank you for your continued support of this podcast. Coming up tomorrow, continue to get you ready for the Pop-Tarts Bowl this weekend. Looking forward to that game. We'll also have a recap of whatever happens for BYU, kind of look back on non-conference play for the BYU basketball program as well. And obviously, you can make sure you follow the show wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We're also active on social media, Locked On Cougars there. And if you need a last-minute holiday gift, or someone keeps asking what you want, because, big days on Thursday, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. It's ad-free episodes of this show, exclusive Discord server access, and more. Subscriptions can be gifted through Locked On Cougars at supercast.com. And of course, as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And until tomorrow, everybody, come back and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.